would like to welcome everyone to the second installment of a new project by the University of Kentucky Gaines Center for the Humanities called Over Yonder, where we're interviewing Kentucky artists and scholars about their experience of working while social distancing. And we have the great opportunity actually to talk to Professor Nikki Brown, who's a professor in history and African American and Africana studies, and also is an artist in her own in her own right. So thank you so much for doing this, Nikki. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So, I have a series of questions that I have been asking, and then in the end, I'll introduce you to my technical support person, who also always gets a shout out, who is my son James. So one of the questions I've been asking people at first as a joke, just as a kind of jokey introduction, but when I asked James this question, he actually had an answer. So I'll see what your answer is, and then I'll tell you what his answer was. So is this your first pandemic?
No, it is not. My first pandemic, the one that I lived through, was AIDS, which was started in the early 1980s, but I remember going to college in the late 1990s, early 1990s, and having friends who were struck down by the disease. And I have friends now who have survived it through a combination of drugs. But what I remember about the 1980s is how angry and how angry activists were, and how their anger prodded the government that was moving very, very slowly to first acknowledge the disease and then work on the disease. And it's interesting, although this is a long answer, it's interesting to remember that there is no vaccine for AIDS, but people do live with it. I have friends that live with it, and they live very rich lives. So that brings me to a level of hope that we can find a way to treat this current pandemic and either learn to live with it if we can't eradicate it altogether.
So James's answer was the Black Plague.
Well, maybe he's a historian in the making.
And I was like, the Black Plague? And he was like, yes, during medieval times.
Sure.
I was like, you're 10 now. So, so tell me a little bit about your workspace. Did you have a dedicated home workspace, or is this something you had to create as part of the stay-at-home, stay safe order?
I had to create it. I have 2 cats at home, and I resisted. For a long, long time, I resisted having an office at home, because eventually they would want to sit on my lap and then crawl across the keyboard, and I could never get any work done. And in fact, I don't know if you can see
you're petting a cat right now.
Exactly. Here she is. And I'm gonna put her, because otherwise, So I could never get any work done. So I learned to work either at the library, or I learned to work at my office at work. And then here, I just happened to get lucky. The Department of History had some extra tables and chairs set aside, and as long as I promised to bring them back at the end of the epidemic, I could take them, and so I did. I took 2 tables, 2 chairs, and I bought a bookcase, and I made this workspace. And so, and I really do try to treat it as a workspace. Like I don't sleep, I don't take a nap in here, I don't watch TV in here, I don't watch cat videos in here. I actually use this space to write, and that seems to have worked. The cats, however, do not respect those boundaries, as you can see.
So what can you tell us a little bit about the projects you been able to continue
Uh-huh.
your work, or have you
Yeah,
taken new projects? How is the work going? What are you working on?
couple of things. Couple of things. In terms of writing, I was able to finish a manuscript on the Afro Turks. I may have talked to you about this. I know I talked about it when I visited here to look for a job. I mean, for my job talk, but there was a manuscript that I was working on about growing up Black and Turkish, and the person who wrote that memoir gave it to me to translate it into English and to find an American market for it, to publish it in English. And I finished that manuscript, I think, probably the beginning of April, and I sent it out to an editor friend of mine. And he just got back to me yesterday with his changes, but he wants that to move forward. So that was good. I mean, that was sort of research related. So the Afro Turks are a uh, population of people in the country of Turkey that are Afro-Turk in the same way I am African American. They are the descendants of enslaved people, but instead of them being the descendants of enslaved people on the western coast of Africa, which is a huge continent, the biggest in the world, they are second biggest. They are descendants of people who are from the eastern coast of Africa. And that means Kenya, uh, Egypt, just people on and Central Africa, like Sudan or South Sudan and Chad. And the Ottoman Empire had a pretty extensive empire that reached across North Africa and into Eastern Africa. And I met the Afro Turks in 2014 when I had a Fulbright award to Turkey, and it was completely accidental. I did not know about them until I met them in 2014. I met the person who is the leader, who has since passed away. This guy right here, I want to stop right here. The guy who is the leader is this man named here, Mustafa Olpak. And I met him, and he had written an autobiography about his life as an Afro-Turk, and he wanted me to translate it into English and to find a publisher to publish it in English in the United States. He also wanted to meet Barack Obama. Like, he wanted to do a lot of things, but but meeting Barack Obama was not in my power. But publishing his memoir is in my power. So, as a part of this project of taking his memoir and editing it and putting it into memoir form for a publisher, I also took a lot of these pictures and came up with a second book, a second idea, which is to talk about the Afro Turks in pictures and in their own memories. And I think the inspiration for that book was this book that you and I both know, Melinda, and that's called I Dream a World by Brian Lanker. That basically is portraits and oral histories. So that is my second project. I hope to do that next year. But in the 6 years since I met the Afro Turks, I've been going back to Turkey at least once a year and taking photographs and talking to people and collecting oral histories, and that's part of what my long-term research agenda is.
Okay.
So this is Mustafa. I want to stop right here. I took this picture. This picture, I remember it very clearly, or these set of pictures were in 2016, in the summer of 2016, and Mustafa passed away about 3 months later of prostate cancer. So that's why he's looking particularly frail in those pictures. But these are Afro-Turkish people. So these are Turkish people. They speak Turkish almost exclusively. They are Muslim. They are dues-paying citizens of the Republic of Turkey.
Were they Muslim before they came to Turkey? or were they converted as part of the enslavement process?
That's an excellent question, and the answer is the second. They were not Muslim before their ancestors came to Turkey. They were converted as part of the process of enslavement.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and so that's the work that I do, and that's, that was going back to your question earlier. It really was. I'm gonna take off the share, and I'm gonna say this. It really was. I did not go to Turkey with this intent. I did not go to Turkey, really even intending to take photographs or documenting stuff, but it just seemed to me that this project was so important, that their narratives are so important, and we as African Americans know how important photography is in documenting our lives. So that's the thing that we can control, which is the way that we talk about our history. We know that now. So I really took to this project, and they have been incredibly not just kind or helpful. They have welcomed me in a way that I could not have imagined. I know that I don't speak Turkish, but they put up with me, and they have allowed me to do this really deep work, and I'm very grateful for it. I was in a photography class, and I completed a photography project based on a song that I listened to pretty regularly. And I can show you some of the pictures from that. And so, yes, so the assignment, I'm just going to do here, the assignment was to take a work of fiction or nonfiction, take a written work, and try to use your photography skills to illustrate that work, or to somehow adapt that work to photography. So here we are right here. I'm going to share my screen. So I used this song called "Walk On" by U2. I can't believe this song is 20 years old, but it's about it's a long story. So I thank you. I'm not going to tell you the entire story, but I used to go for a walk every day, and I would listen to this song every day, and it's basically about how sometimes things are difficult, but you just have to keep moving forward and hope that the world eventually catches up with you. So I would listen to this song every day. So this is the first image of, and I don't know if you can see it, but here's my hand hitting or hitting the alarm clock. And this is me sort of putting on my knee sleeves every day to get prepared to go on a walk, because I've got pretty bad arthritis in my knees, and so I need things like this to put on my sleeves. And then I would also have to tape my feet because I also had plantar fasciitis. So I was doing that. And then this is me right before the lockdown in McConnell Springs, right before. And in fact, McConnell Springs was officially closed, but I just walked in there anyway and just happened to take a series of pictures. And so here's sort of enjoying McConnell Springs and so forth, and sort of using that time period, using that space to, again, illustrate the song. Here's this big, beautiful tree in McConnell Springs that I guess I was right here. I was trying to illustrate this idea that sometimes things got really tough for me, and I needed a shelter, a space where I could sort of, let it all out and then pull myself together. So that was that. And then, at the end of the walk, I would come home, and this is right back during the lockdown. These are the end of the photographs, and me coming up the stairs. And then there's me on my couch with my cat Florence that just was eating my face, and the idea that at the end of the day, that's what this all was. That's what this was all about. Sort of just trying to make it through the end of the day. So,
how long have you been using photography as part of your sort of intellectual expression? Like, was it something you did on the side that slowly crept into the work, or you sort of, how did it come to be?
You know, I had, it's a super, super great question. I think I had been using it as a way to document my feelings or document my environment and my relationship to the environment. But I don't mean like environment in terms of trees and climate change. I mean the space around me. Um, I started doing that probably in 2006, 2005, 2006, before I moved to New Orleans and long before I moved here. Essentially, I had always been interested in representation and interested in the ways Black people were represented. And one of the things that I really like about photography, at least modern photography, and particularly cell phone photography, is that it used to be really, really expensive, and now it's incredibly inexpensive. And not only can people control their own image, but as we've learned in the last 5 or 6 years, we aren't just consumers, we are documenters. So I began to document my life in New Orleans around 2008. I moved to New Orleans and I was living in Monroe, Louisiana, and I moved to New Orleans in 2008 to take a job. And I thought it was really interesting that the way people talked about New Orleans, like the media, whatever the mass media, whatever that is, talked about New Orleans after Katrina as being this violent, dangerous place. And when I lived there, I didn't see that at all. I saw people swinging hammers, trying to fix their houses. I saw people trying to fix schools. I saw people navigating the city. And so that's when I seriously began to pick up my camera and to document the lives around me, to try to figure out how was it that the photographs that are on how was it that what I see as a resident of New Orleans, as a Black person living in New Orleans, is so different from the way people perceive New Orleans, Black, white, and whatever, who don't live there, who don't live in the city. And that's when I began to take it very, very seriously. Yeah.
So one of the questions that I've been asking people, which I think I'll ask you as well, is so we've all been have a lot of angst about sickness or sickness of the people that we care about, or people who are in our community who we may not know but still do not want to suffer. And I was wondering, did your mother or your parents or whoever cared for you when you were younger have any famous home remedies?
Oh, it's strange. It goes right back to food. I would say, that not so much. There is no specific recipe that I remember my dad or my mother giving to me. Instead, they believed that I know that this sounds a little weird, but they believed that like grilled food was was better for you than like fried food or even like roasted food. So that when we were sick, they would always give me like chicken soup, but but the chicken had to be grilled. It had to be on the grill. It had to, and they loved the taste of it. And they
Wait a minute, did you grow up in Rochester?
yeah, but my parents were from the South. I'm a child of the Great Migration.
Grilling in Rochester,
Yeah.
at least 6 months out of the year, it has to be pretty cold.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You know, Melinda, I was talking about this with my dad yesterday. There were times, he told me this, there were times in which he would brave like the 20-degree weather, the 25-degree weather, just to get that grilled chicken.
So,
Yeah, that's it.
what are some of the home remedies that you've come up with as you care for yourself during this time?
Oh, goodness.
What are some of the things you're doing to sustain, to maintain, or even to thrive?
That's a good question because, you know, again, when I think remedies, I think food, but I'm not really, no, it's so strange. It's so strange. I bought my first grill on my own like last week, and I have to agree with my dad. The food is delicious. But it is delicious. But that's not a remedy in itself. I have to say that what brings me solace is getting out of the house and getting on my bicycle and seeing people in my neighborhood and not in my neighborhood, but seeing people and saying hello to them, waving to them, seeing people out and about, and realizing that they're just trying to um, go on with their lives as well, just like I am. I have to say, this actually happened. I have to say, there are days when I forget that we are in the middle of a pandemic. There are moments, and and it's counterintuitive. When I'm in my house watching the news, it's all pandemic all the time. But when I'm outside, and this happened a few days ago, when I'm outside and I'm walking and I'm just listening to music and I'm just moving, I forget that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And in fact, I forget about social distancing. So I was walking down the sidewalk, and an elderly woman saw me coming, and I wasn't thinking about pandemic. And so I didn't move off the sidewalk for her. And she started walking on the neighbor's lawn. And I thought, that's weird. Why is she doing that? And then I thought, oh my goodness, we're in a pandemic. And I apologized to her, and I said, I'm so sorry. I should have made more space for you, but I was so into walking that I had forgotten that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I just saw you as just another walker, and not as a someone that we should both be giving each other space. I don't know if that's just a statement about my own absent-mindedness, which is legendary. But I feel like if there's one thing that I can do, that I have been doing, honestly, it's just meditation. I do that for about 5 minutes a day, and and that helps me to, accept that there are going to be negative thoughts that come into my mind, and I'm just going to let them come in and then float on out, and that I can make a choice on what it is that I want to work on, and I find that to be very helpful.
So my last question is, what is there anything that you have started or any practices or habits that you think you might keep?
I like the meditation. I think I'm probably going to start another photographic series, a series of self portraits, probably inspired by the pandemic, all the stuff that I do on the inside. Um, and I probably, whew, I'm on completely different note, but yet related. I'm probably gonna cook at home more. But going out to dinner was just really, really easy for me. So, and I didn't have to think about stuff. And usually the food was delicious. But I'm finding that staying home and making meals for myself is actually, it's not arduous. I say that because I don't like to cook. I like to bake. Um, but I'm finding that even if I don't like to cook, I can make peace with it, and I think I'm probably going to carry that forward in the future. So maybe meditating for 5 minutes and continue on with my photography projects and making more of my own meals. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.